The transport ship docked at Station Varath 7 with a gentle shudder. Maya Chen stood near the exit hatch, her small bag over one shoulder. She was 32 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 130 pounds. By human standards, she was fit and capable. By galactic standards, she was tiny. The hatch opened, and she stepped into the massive docking bay. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved around her. Some had scales, some had fur, some had neither. A creature that looked like a walking tree shuffled past her without a second glance. Maya kept her face calm and walked toward the processing center. The Galactic Coalition Military Academy accepted recruits from over 200 species. They trained together, learned together, and prepared to serve as peacekeepers across known space. Humanity had only made contact with the Coalition 3 years ago. Maya was the first human accepted into the Elite Vanguard program. She had worked very hard to get here. She had beaten thousands of other candidates from Earth. But here, none of that mattered. Here she was simply the strange new creature from a backwater planet. The processing center was a long hall filled with scanning equipment and busy technicians. Maya joined a line of new recruits. In front of her stood a massive being covered in blue fur. Behind her was something that looked like a giant insect with too many eyes. She did not stare at either of them. When her turn came, a technician waved her toward a circular platform. The technician was a Melvari, a species that resembled tall, thin birds with 4 arms. He looked at his tablet and then looked at her. "Human," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Maya replied. "First one we have processed. Stand still." Maya stood on the platform. Blue light washed over her from above. The scanner hummed and clicked. It was supposed to take only a few seconds, but the seconds stretched into a minute, then 2 minutes. The technician tapped his tablet with growing frustration. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked. "The scanner is malfunctioning. Wait here." He walked away and returned with 2 other technicians. They gathered around the display screen and spoke in low voices. Maya could not hear what they said, but she could see their confusion. One of them ran the scan again. The machine hummed. The technicians stared at the results with their beaks hanging open. "This cannot be correct," one said. "Run it again," said another. They ran it again and again. Each time they looked more disturbed. Finally, one of them noticed Maya watching and waved her off the platform. "You may proceed to orientation," he said quickly. "Your identification has been registered." Maya nodded and walked away. Behind her, she heard one technician whisper to another. "The readings make no sense. It shows her as minimal threat and maximum threat at the same time. How is that possible? Perhaps the machine needs repairs? Perhaps. Or perhaps we simply do not understand what we are looking at." Maya did not look back. She kept walking. The orientation hall was a vast room with tiered seating. Hundreds of recruits sat in groups based on species. Maya found herself alone in a corner. No other humans had come. She sat down and waited. A door at the front of the hall opened and an enormous figure walked in. He was Drakveen, a species of reptilian warriors known throughout the galaxy. He stood over 7 feet tall. His scales were dark green and his eyes were yellow with vertical slits. He wore the uniform of a senior instructor, decorated with medals from campaigns Maya could not identify. "I am Commander Keth Vorel," he announced. His voice was deep and carried easily across the hall. "I am the lead combat instructor for the Vanguard program. For the next cycle, your lives belong to me." He paced across the front of the hall, his clawed feet clicking against the floor. His gaze swept over the recruits like a predator examining prey. "The Vanguard program is not for the weak. It is not for the slow. It is not for those who cannot adapt. Many of you will fail. Many of you will be sent home in shame. Only the best will remain." His eyes found Maya in her corner. He stopped walking. "I see we have a human this cycle," he said. A few recruits turned to look at her. Humanity, a newly contacted species, soft skin, fragile bones, short lifespan. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. Tell me, human, why are you here? Maya stood up. Every eye in the hall was on her now. To serve the coalition, Commander, she said. Her voice was steady. To serve. He repeated the words as if they tasted strange. Admirable. But service requires capability. What capability do you offer? I am a trained soldier, Commander. I have combat experience. Combat experience? Another almost laugh. Against what? Other humans? Your species has only been fighting among yourselves until now. You know nothing of true combat. Maya said nothing. She simply looked at him with calm eyes. Keth seemed annoyed by her lack of reaction. He waved his clawed hand dismissively. Sit down, human. Based on your species assessment, you will be assigned to the lowest training tier. Try not to embarrass yourself. Maya sat down. Around her, some recruits made sounds of amusement. She ignored them. After orientation, the recruits were assigned to their quarters. Maya found herself in a small room meant for species of her size. She set down her bag and sat on the narrow bed. Through the window, she could see the stars. She thought about Keth and his dismissal. She thought about the confused technicians and their broken scanner. She thought about everything she had left behind on Earth to come here. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small book. It was old, the pages worn from years of handling. It was a book about martial arts, written by a master who had died long before Maya was born. She had read it hundreds of times. She opened it to a page she knew by heart. The text was simple. It said, "The greatest weapon is patience. The greatest armor is stillness. Let your enemies see what they expect to see. And when they have decided you are nothing, show them everything." Maya closed the book and lay down on her bed. Tomorrow, her training would begin. Tomorrow, she would start to learn what these aliens could do. She would watch. She would listen. She would remember. And when the time was right, she would show them what a human could do. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and bright. Inside her chest, something waited. Something coiled and patient and very, very old. Maya closed her eyes and slept. The weeks that followed were difficult. Maya woke each morning before the artificial dawn. She ate alone in the corner of the mess hall. She trained with recruits who did not want her there, and every day Commander Keth found new ways to remind her that she did not belong. The training sessions were brutal. The Vanguard program focused on combat, strategy, and survival. Recruits sparred against each other under the watchful eyes of instructors. They learned to fight with weapons and without. They learned to move through hostile environments. They learned to kill and to stay alive. Maya was placed in the lowest tier, as Keth had promised. Her training partners were always larger than her, stronger than her, faster than her. They threw her to the ground again and again. They hit her with padded weapons that still left bruises. They pinned her down until she could not breathe. She never complained. She never asked for easier opponents. She simply got up each time she fell and waited for the next attack. Keth liked to use her in demonstrations. He would call her to the front of the training hall and have one of the larger cadets attack her while he explained proper techniques. The attacks were not gentle. Maya took hits that would have broken bones if the cadets had not held back at the last moment. Sometimes they did not hold back enough. "Notice how the human struggles to maintain balance," Keth would say, as Maya stumbled from a blow. "Her center of gravity is too high. Her reaction time is too slow. This is the result of evolution on a low-gravity world with few natural predators." Maya would stand up, wipe the blood from her lip, and return to her position. She never argued. She never glared. She simply watched and waited. The other cadets did not know what to make of her. Some pitied her. Some ignored her. A few seemed to enjoy her suffering, but none of them tried to become her friend. She was too strange, too different, too weak. What was the point of befriending someone who would surely fail? There was one cadet who avoided her completely. His name was Velthani, and he was Tellurian. The Tellurians were known for their empathic abilities. They could sense the emotions of others. They could feel fear and anger and joy as if it were their own. Velthani was young for his species, with pale gray skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to see too much. During group exercises, Velthani always positioned himself far from Maya. When they were assigned to the same squad, he requested transfers. The instructors thought he was simply uncomfortable around a new species. Maya thought differently. One evening, after a particularly harsh training session, Maya found Velthani in the corridor outside the medical bay. She had a cut above her eye that needed treatment. He was standing against the wall, looking shaken. "You are avoiding me," Maya said. It was not an accusation, just a statement. Velthani flinched. Yes, I am sorry, it is not personal." "Then what is it?" He was quiet for a long moment. His large eyes studied her face. Then he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "When I sense others, I feel what they feel. Fear is cold, anger is hot, joy is bright. These things are simple to understand." He paused. "When I sense you, I feel something I have never felt before. There is something inside you, something coiled tight, something waiting. It is not anger. It is not fear. I do not have words for it." Maya looked at him with steady eyes. "Does it frighten you?" "Yes," he admitted, "because I do not think you are weak at all. I think you are something else entirely, and I think you are hiding it from everyone." Maya said nothing. After a moment, she walked past him into the medical bay. Velthani watched her go. His hands were trembling. The next week, Kethavorel gathered all the recruits for a lecture on species capabilities. He displayed charts and statistics on a large screen, physical strength comparisons, speed measurements, endurance ratings. Humans ranked near the bottom in almost every category. "As you can see," Kethavorel said, pointing to the data, "some species are simply more suited for combat than others. The Drakveen, for example, have strength ratings 3 times higher than the galactic average. Our scales provide natural armor. Our reflexes are among the fastest recorded." He pulled up another chart. "Humans, on the other hand, have soft skin that tears easily. Their bones break under minimal pressure. Their senses are dull compared to most species. One must wonder how they survived long enough to develop space travel." A few cadets laughed. Maya sat in the back row, her face expressionless. "Perhaps the human can explain," Kethavorel said, looking directly at her. "How did your species survive? What advantages did evolution give you?" Maya stood up slowly. The room went quiet. "Commander, humans are persistence predators," she said. Kethavorel tilted his head. "Explain." "On Earth, we did not have the strength to overpower our prey. We did not have the speed to chase them down in short bursts. So we developed a different strategy." She paused. "We followed them. We walked after them for hours, for days. We did not need to be faster. We just needed to never stop. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion, and we would still be walking toward them." The room was very silent now. "Our bodies are designed to keep going long after other creatures have given up," Maya continued. "We sweat to regulate temperature. We have efficient 2-legged movement. We can run and walk for distances that would kill most species." She looked at Kethavorel. "We were never the strongest or the fastest, but we were always the most persistent." Kethavorel stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his yellow eyes. It might have been doubt. It might have been the first hint of caution. "Interesting," he said finally, "but persistence alone will not save you in combat. Sit down." Maya sat down. Around her, the other cadets were looking at her differently now. Not with pity. not with amusement, with something closer to uncertainty. That night, Maya trained alone in one of the empty practice rooms. She moved through forms she had learned on Earth. Slow movements, precise and controlled. She practiced strikes on a training dummy, each one landing in the exact same spot. She practiced throws against imaginary opponents, using momentum instead of strength. She thought about Keth Vorel. She had studied him for weeks now. She knew how he moved. She knew where his joints bent and where they did not. She knew the angle of his elbows and the placement of his weight. She knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum pain. But she did not strike. Not yet. She was not ready. So she practiced. And she waited. And inside her chest, the coiled thing grew tighter. The midterm evaluation arrived on a cold station morning. All recruits gathered in the main training hall, a massive space with high ceilings and smooth floors designed for combat. The walls were lined with observation windows where senior officers could watch. Today, those windows were full. Commander Keth Vorel stood in the center of the hall. He wore his full uniform, medals gleaming under the harsh lights. His yellow eyes moved across the assembled recruits like a hunter deciding which prey to chase first. "Today, you will demonstrate what you have learned," he announced. "Each of you will face me in controlled combat. You will attempt to execute defensive techniques while I attack. This is not about winning. This is about showing proper form under pressure." The exercises began. One by one, recruits stepped forward to face the commander. He attacked them with measured strikes, and they attempted to block and deflect. Some did well. Others stumbled and fell. Keth Vorel offered criticism or praise depending on their performance. It was standard training. Maya waited in the back of the group. She watched each bout carefully. She noted how Keth Vorel moved, how he shifted his weight before each strike, how he recovered after each attack. She had watched him for months now, but she watched again anyway. Details mattered. Her name was called. Maya walked to the center of the hall. She was aware of every eye on her. The observation windows were full of officers who had come specifically to see how the human would perform. She had become something of a curiosity on the station, the weak creature who refused to quit. Keth Vorel looked down at her. He stood nearly 2 feet taller than she did. His arms were thick with muscle. His claws glinted in the light. "Human," he said, "let us see if you have learned anything." Maya took her stance, feet apart, weight balanced, hands raised but relaxed. Keth Vorel attacked with a standard strike, the same one he had used on the other recruits. Maya blocked it. He struck again. She deflected. They moved through the expected pattern, attack and defense, attack and defense. Then something changed. Keth Vorel's next strike was faster, harder. It was not part of the standard exercise. Maya barely dodged it. Before she could recover, he swept at her legs, forcing her to jump back. He pressed forward, his attacks coming faster and harder. This was not a training exercise anymore. This was real. Maya backpedaled across the floor. She blocked what she could and dodged what she could not. A blow caught her shoulder and spun her halfway around. Another grazed her ribs. She tasted blood where she had bitten her tongue. The other recruits watched in silence. Some looked confused. Others looked uncomfortable. This was not how evaluations were supposed to go. Keth Vorel grabbed Maya's shoulder. His claws dug through her uniform and into her skin. She felt the sharp pain of puncture wounds, the warm flow of blood down her arm. He pulled her close until his face was inches from hers. His breath was hot and smelled of meat. "Submit," he growled. "Yield now, and I will recommend your transfer to a more appropriate program, somewhere safe, somewhere for creatures like you." Maya looked up at him. Blood ran down her arm. Pain pulsed through her shoulder. Every instinct told her to give up, to accept his offer, to survive. Instead, she smiled. It was a small smile, calm and cold and completely without fear. It was the smile of something that had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "No," she said softly. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Maya's right hand shot up and seized Keth Vorel's wrist, the one attached to the hand that gripped her shoulder. Her fingers found the exact spot where the tendons were most vulnerable, the spot she had studied for months. She pressed hard. At the same time, she twisted her body, dropping her weight and turning into him instead of away. Her hip caught his thigh. Her shoulder drove into his chest. She used his own grip on her as an anchor point, letting his strength work against him. Keth Vorel was strong. He was fast. He was a trained warrior with decades of experience. But he had never fought a human before. He did not know how they moved. He did not know what they could do with leverage and angles and perfect timing. Maya's other hand came up and locked around his elbow. She pulled and twisted at the same time, applying pressure to the joint in a direction it was not designed to go. Drakveen arms were powerful but rigid. They bent in certain ways and not others. Maya knew exactly which ways they did not bend. There was a sound, a wet crack of stressed cartilage, a pop of tendons stretched beyond their limit. Keth Vorel roared in pain and dropped to his knees. He had no choice. His arm was locked in Maya's grip, and any movement sent lightning bolts of agony through his body. His claws released her shoulder. His other arm hung useless at his side, still recovering from the shock of what had happened. Maya stood over him. She was breathing hard. Blood soaked her uniform, but her eyes were steady, and her grip on his arm did not waver. The training hall was absolutely silent. Hundreds of recruits stood frozen. Officers pressed against the observation windows. No one moved. No one spoke. Maya leaned down until her mouth was next to Keth Vorel's ear. When she spoke, her voice was soft, gentle even, but it carried in the silence like thunder. "Good boy." She released his arm and stepped back. Keth Vorel remained on his knees for a long moment, cradling his injured limb. His yellow eyes stared at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It was not anger. It was not hatred. It was fear. Medical personnel rushed forward to tend to the commander. Other instructors moved to restore order. Maya stood alone in the center of the hall, surrounded by chaos but untouched by it. Velthani, the Tellurian empath, stood at the edge of the crowd. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He had felt what Maya felt in that moment of release. The coiled thing inside her had finally uncoiled, and it was exactly as terrible as he had feared. The recruits parted as Maya walked through them. No one met her eyes. No one spoke to her. They simply moved aside and let her pass. She walked out of the training hall and down the corridor toward her quarters. Behind her, she heard the buzzing of voices as people began to process what they had witnessed. She did not look back. In her small room, Maya sat on her bed and looked at her hands. They were steady, no trembling, no shaking. She felt calm, clear, complete. She had shown them a glimpse of what humans could do. Just a glimpse. There was so much more she had not revealed. But it was enough for now. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and bright. And somewhere on the station, officers were already sending messages to their superiors. The human had done something impossible. The human had beaten a Drakveen warrior. The human was not what they had expected. The footage spread like fire through dry grass. Within an hour, every screen on Station Verath 7 showed the same video. The human woman facing the Drakveen commander, the attack, the grab, the twist, the crack, the fall, and those two words spoken so softly that somehow everyone could hear. Good boy. Within a day, the video had spread beyond the station. Military channels picked it up first, then civilian networks, then everyone else. Across the coalition, beings of every species watched the tiny human bring a legendary warrior to his knees. Maya stayed in her quarters. She was not arrested, but she was asked to remain available while the Academy Council decided what to do. She sat on her bed, read her book, and waited. Commander Keth Vorel demanded her expulsion. He filed formal complaints. He called for disciplinary action. His arm was in a regeneration sleeve, healing slowly. The medical report said she had torn 3 tendons and cracked the cartilage in his elbow joint. For a Drakveen, it was a serious injury. For his pride, it was a mortal wound. The Academy Council met for 2 days. They reviewed the footage from every angle. They examined the biometric data from Maya's training band. They interviewed witnesses. They argued and debated and argued some more. What bothered them most was not what Maya had done. It was how she had done it. Military analysts broke down her movements frame by frame. They measured the angle of her grip, the timing of her twist, the placement of her feet. Everything was perfect. Not lucky. Not desperate. Perfect. She had known exactly what she was doing. She had known exactly how Drakveen anatomy worked. She had known exactly where to apply pressure. But how? Humans had only known about the Drakveen for 3 years. Their anatomy was not public knowledge. It was certainly not taught in basic training. The answer, when they found it, was disturbing. Maya had learned by watching. For months, she had observed Keth Vorel and other Drakveen on the station. She had noted how they moved, how they stood, how they favored certain positions. She had studied their bodies the way a predator studies prey, and she had figured out their weaknesses on her own. This was not supposed to be possible. Other species needed years of formal study to understand alien anatomy. They needed textbooks and diagrams and expert instruction. Maya had done it with nothing but her eyes and her patience. The Coalition's intelligence division got involved. They began pulling records from Earth, military records, historical records, cultural records. What they found made them very uncomfortable. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire history. They had developed thousands of different ways to kill. Some methods were quick and brutal. Others were slow and precise. They had created weapons of every kind, from simple clubs to nuclear bombs. And they had refined their combat techniques over thousands of years. But what surprised the Coalition most was what humans did after they learned to fight. They wrote it down. They taught it to their children. They created schools and academies where killing was studied like a science. They analyzed every movement, every technique, every weakness. They turned violence into knowledge. And then, strangest of all, they chose to stop. Humans had created the most sophisticated methods of killing in known space. And then they had built societies where most of them lived in peace. They had learned to control the violence inside them, to save it, to use it only when necessary. The Drakveen were warriors by nature. The Tellurians were empaths by nature. The Melvari were engineers by nature. Humans, the Coalition realized, were predators by choice. They could be peaceful. They could be kind. They could be gentle. But when they needed to be dangerous, they were more dangerous than almost anything else in the galaxy. The scanner technicians were called before the Academy Council. They explained the readings they had recorded when Maya first arrived, minimal threat and maximum threat at the same time. Now it made sense. Humans were minimal threats until they decided not to be. Then they were maximum threats. Admiral Vorshak was one of the oldest beings in Coalition service. He had served in a dozen campaigns. He had faced enemies that would give most species nightmares. He read the new assessment of humanity and sat in silence for a long time. "We have made a mistake," he said finally. "We looked at humans and saw their soft skin, their small size, their short lives. We thought they were weak because they looked weak." He set down the report. "They are not weak. They are something far more concerning. They are adaptable. They analyze. They learn. They overcome, and they do not give up." He looked at the other council members. "The question is not whether to expel this human. The question is how we treat humanity from this point forward." The scanner database was updated that evening. The old entry for humans was deleted. The new entry was short. It contained only 7 words. Do not challenge. They adapt. Maya received word the next morning. She was not being expelled. She was not being punished. Instead, she was being reassigned to teaching. The council had decided that humans possessed something valuable. They could analyze opponents and find weaknesses that others missed. They could adapt their fighting style to any situation. They could remain calm under pressure that would break other species. These skills could be taught, and Maya would teach them. She reported to the administrative office to receive her new assignment. The officer who processed her paperwork was a Melvari, the same species as the scanner technicians. He kept glancing at her as if expecting her to attack. "You will be teaching adaptive combat techniques," he said. "Your first class begins next week. You will have students from 12 different species." Maya nodded. "I understand." The officer hesitated. "May I ask you something?" "Yes." "The commander, Keth Vorel, he is a decorated warrior. He has defeated opponents 3 times his size. How did you know you could beat him?" Maya considered the question. "I did not know," she said honestly. "But I believed, and sometimes belief is enough." She left the office and walked through the station corridors. Beings moved out of her way as she passed. They did not do it consciously. They simply felt the urge to step aside and followed it. That evening, Maya sat in her quarters and looked out at the stars. She thought about Earth. She thought about all the humans who were waiting for news of her mission. She thought about what her success might mean for her species. Humanity had spent 3 years being ignored by the galaxy. They had been dismissed as newcomers, as primitives, as weaklings. Now, the galaxy knew the truth. Or at least, it knew a small part of the truth. There was so much more that humans could do, so much more they could show, but that would come later. For now, this was enough. Maya smiled and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would begin teaching aliens how to fight like humans. It would be interesting to see how they handled it. Outside, the stars burned on, indifferent to the small changes that would eventually reshape the galaxy. 6 months passed. Maya's classes grew from a single session to 5 sessions per week. Students came from every program in the academy. They came because they were curious. They stayed because they learned things no one else could teach them. She did not teach them to be stronger. She taught them to be smarter. She showed them how to watch their opponents, how to find the small movements that revealed big weaknesses, how to use angles and leverage instead of raw power, how to stay calm when everything inside them screamed to panic. "Fighting is not about muscle," she told them on the first day of every new class. "Fighting is about information. The one who knows more will win, always." Her students practiced watching. They spent hours observing each other, noting habits and patterns. They learned to see the tiny shifts in weight that came before an attack. They learned to predict movements before they happened. They learned to read bodies like books. The results were remarkable. Cadets who had struggled for months suddenly began winning their sparring matches. They did not become stronger or faster. They simply knew more, and knowing more made all the difference. Word spread beyond the academy. Military commanders from across the coalition requested copies of Maya's training materials. Scholars wrote papers analyzing human combat philosophy. News programs ran stories about the strange species that turned warfare into a science. Maya took it all in stride. She taught her classes. She trained alone in the evenings. She read her book about patience and stillness. And she waited for what she knew would eventually come. He came on a quiet evening when most of the station was asleep. Maya was practicing forms in an empty training room when the door opened. She did not turn around. She already knew who it was. Commander Keth Vorel walked slowly across the floor. His arm was healed now, the regeneration sleeve gone. But he moved it carefully, as if remembering the pain. He stopped 10 feet away from her and waited. Maya finished her form and turned to face him. They looked at each other in silence. Keth Vorel was different. Something in his eyes had changed. The arrogance was gone. The cruelty was gone. What remained was something quieter, something that looked almost like wisdom. "I owe you an apology," he said. His voice was rough, as if the words cost him effort. "I treated you poorly. I underestimated you. I was wrong." Maya nodded, but did not speak. "I have watched your classes," he continued. "I have seen what you teach. It is not just technique, it is a way of thinking, a way of seeing the world." He paused. "It is something I never learned, something the Drakveen have never learned." "What is that?" Maya asked. "Humility," he said. "Your people are not the strongest. You know this. You accept it, and so you find other ways to win. The Drakveen have always relied on strength. We never needed to adapt. We never needed to watch and wait and learn. We simply overpowered everything in our path." He looked at his healed arm. "Until we could not." Maya studied him for a long moment. She saw the effort it took for him to come here, to admit he was wrong. For a Drakveen warrior, this was harder than any battle. "Why are you here?" she asked. Keth Vorel met her eyes. "I wish to learn. I wish to understand what you understand. I wish to see as you see." "You want me to teach you?" "Yes," Maya considered. Outside, the station hummed with the quiet sounds of sleep. Inside, two beings from opposite ends of the galaxy faced each other across a training room floor. "I will teach you," Maya said, "but you must understand something first." "What?" "What I did to you that day, the technique, the timing, the precision." She paused. "I was holding back." Keth Vorel stared at her. "Holding back?" "I could have killed you. I knew exactly where to strike to collapse your windpipe. I knew where to hit to stop your heart. I knew a dozen ways to end your life in that moment." Her voice was calm, matter of fact. "But I did not want to kill you. I wanted to teach you, so I chose a technique that would hurt you, humiliate you, but not harm you permanently." The Drakveen commander was silent. His face had gone pale beneath his scales. "You ask how long I was holding back," Maya continued. "The answer is, since the day I arrived. Every hit I took, every fall, every bruise and cut and broken bone, I could have stopped them, but I chose not to, because I was learning too. I was watching and waiting and studying, just like I teach my students to do." She stepped closer to him. Despite his size, he did not move. "Humans are dangerous," she said softly, "but not because we are strong, because we are patient. We can wait for years if we need to. We can endure anything while we wait. And when we finally act, we act with everything we have learned." Keth Vorel swallowed. "I understand. Do you? Then understand this as well. We do not enjoy killing. We do not seek violence. When we are patient, when we are watching, when we are waiting, we are hoping that we will never need to act at all. We are hoping that peace will be enough." She smiled, and for the first time, it was warm. "I would rather teach you than fight you, Commander. I would rather have you as an ally than an enemy. This is what humans prefer, peace over war, teaching over killing. But if we must fight..." The warmth faded. "Then we will fight until one of us is gone." Keth Vorel bowed his head. It was a gesture of submission, the most profound a Drakveen could offer. When he raised his head again, there was respect in his eyes. "Then teach me," he said. "I am ready to learn." They began that night. The Drakveen warrior and the human instructor moving through forms together in the empty training room. They practiced watching. They practiced patience. They practiced the art of seeing what others could not see. The next morning, a new transport arrived at Station Verath 7. The hatch opened, and a group of young recruits stepped out. Among them were 3 humans. More would follow in the months to come. The galaxy had taken notice. The scanners had been updated. The assessments had been revised. And humanity, quiet and patient as always, was beginning to take its place among the stars. Maya watched the new arrivals from an observation window. She saw the young humans looking around with wonder and nervousness. She remembered how she had felt on her first day, how alone, how small, how determined. They would not be alone. They would not be dismissed. She had made sure of that. Behind her, Keth Vorel approached. He stood beside her and looked down at the docking bay. "More of your kind," he observed. "Yes," Maya said. "Many more." "The galaxy will never be the same." Maya smiled. "No," she agreed. "It will not." Below them, the young humans began walking toward the processing center. The biometric scanners hummed to life. This time there was no confusion, no malfunction, no puzzled technicians. The screens displayed a single word: acknowledged. And somewhere, in the vast database of the Galactic Coalition, a species once marked as minimal threat was now marked as something else entirely. Partners. The stars burned on, ancient and endless, and humanity, young and patient and full of potential, had finally found its place among them.